Hello, hello. How's it going, everybody? I went rock climbing this past weekend. Oh my goodness. I think, hey Nicola, good to see you. Um, I think between the rock climbing and my sore muscles, I haven't done that in like a decade or more. Um, but I brought the kiddos along. It was fun. I'm sore though, and um, my allergies are just going nuts. So we'll see how long I can make it through the stream without having to like go deal with congestion for a moment. uh, but we are switching it up a little bit here and still getting into some Rust, likely. But we're looking at a thing called cooklang, and we've opened it up or teased it on the stream a few times now. And the looks like I bumped that. Interesting. I was like, "There's this big black bar. What is that?" We've teased it on the stream a few times, and it is in some ways a Markdown esque thing. Um, and I say esque because you can write it in plain text. And potentially there's a space where there's going to be like rich text editors for this kind of thing, but you write it in plain text, and then you have a parser that takes that plain text and makes it into something that renders nicer. And what's interesting here is that it can do some math and stuff in the background. So when I say cooklang, cook as in like you make food, the thing you eat, and you write a recipe. So like the thing that you follow to make food for yourself. Not, I feel like all these words tend to overlap with like programming concepts. So like we have a recipe, not well, like we're gonna have to define recipe of cooking food versus like recipe or pattern that you use in programming. Um, so what you're doing is you write plain text with some specific syntax, and it will like create the ingredient list for you. And there's some like roll up ability of that. If you know quantities, you are able to do different scales and then potentially make like shopping lists off of that. So if you have a recipe, it's not uncommon to say like I want to double the recipe because I've got friends coming over or something. Sometimes the math is easy, sometimes it's a little bit more annoying. But then like now you have 2 or 3 different recipes that you're making for the week, and you need to scale those differently. If you have something that sort of just does it for you, it's kind of neat. My specific interest though is we can actually let's pop right on over here. We have this. I've had this on my site for quite some time now. This is actually pulled out of Airtable. I write it, or it's gone through a handful of iterations now. And some of the styling I could probably use a little elbow grease, but it works. It pulls out of Airtable into like a JSON format that then gets dumped into Astro content collection, and then so this is in Astro. It's now an Astro site, and Astro is the thing that does like the static generation. So it takes content from various different places or renders it and creates the HTML files for it. So where cooklang kind of comes into that equation, I can, instead of relying on Airtable, we've on the stream before, we've gotten in a bunch of like local first, own your own data, that sort of thing. In part, Airtable was convenient because I could share it with my spouse, and I'm still interested in that. But the ability to like scale things differently and maintain that list, I think, is going to be easier than trying to sort of like strong arm it into Airtable. So this we can at some point eventually, when the cookling setups and everything that we're potentially talking about today is in place, I can go in here and swap these recipes out of Airtable and into this cookling format. So, all of that being said, what we're talking about today is, we'll go over to I got this still open. Actually, I can close these. We did local first stuff. If you're interested, speaking of local first, if you're interested in local first, we went through the local first landscape last week. This is done at least in tandem by a bunch of folks that Johannes runs the Local First podcast, but they also have a conference as well, which was running last week, if I recall correctly. Both neat things. We'll check in that again soon, because some of those talks and discussions and stuff that come out of that will be something that'll be interesting for us to talk to. But that being said, Cooklang, there is an organization for it, and they have a handful of repositories, some of which are the Cooklang CLI. It seems like it's gone through a few iterations, and I've been interested in this as a concept and this project in particular for a while. It seems like it's gone through a couple iterations now. They've got a lot of different, like the intent seems to be get a good spec. With a good spec, you can then have many different languages actually be able to parse it. But Rust being Rust, it seems like it is starting to settle back into Rust as like the base parser. And then we've got like Swift. We've got I've done a little work getting TypeScript as a more I've shifted things around to make it more obvious that like this TypeScript thing existed in this repo. And then there's this bindings. So they already got bindings with UniFFI, which do they have? I thought I remember seeing a list some. Oh, maybe it's in the main README. Where do I remember seeing that? Extensions. No, not extensions. I thought I remember seeing a list of here. So these bindings then are something that you can basically like pull this off the shelf, and then you could use this in Kotlin, Swift, Ruby, Python, and some other languages. So like FFI is a generic way to talk between these different languages. So in any of these like Rust libraries that are built on top of C bindings, there's a good chance that they have FFI in there to do that, like communication between Rust and C or whatever base thing it was written in. So with this Rust parser, what's nice is like having a spec is good, but if you have a single parser, now the implementation of that spec is potentially consistent across all of these different languages, which is neat. In some ways, you can think of it like the web ecosystem or the browsers have a spec, but Firefox and Safari and Chrome are all just a little bit different and have different like the implementation of APIs is at different levels or correctness even. So some of it is like the spec is potentially designed after it's been implemented in Chrome or something, and now Chrome is sort of like pushing that spec along or pulling it rather than pushing it. So by having both a single spec and potentially a single parser is interesting, I think, especially for a project of this size, because it's not there's not it's not huge as far as number of folks that are involved with it. So having a single like source of truth, I think, is a beneficial thing. So what I want to specifically look at today, as you might have gathered from the title, is the WASM into TypeScript implementation. So we had there's cooklang-ts, which is like the parser, and then from there there's a cook CLI, and then I think there's a recipe, cooklang reports, cooklang find. I don't know what the status of like this is, but I know, recipes is, or reports is more for like the taking the parsed thing and then scaling and building on top of it for like doing shopping lists and stuff. And I think Cook CLI sort of combines a bunch of these like Rust crates together. But what we're specifically interested in today is looking at the TypeScript implementation, because I'm interested in writing this in Obsidian, which is the note-taking app that I use, and or VS Code, and then potentially get it into Astro. So there are implementations of all of these previously, in part built on top of, there was a cooklang TypeScript. Now this was purely implemented in TypeScript, and Dubadub, Alexei, who's the creator, started looking at if we have this Rust parser, what does it look like to share it? And they started working on this, and it I in part kind of got myself involved because it looked like this idea was starting to stall, and it was a thing that I knew I could get involved with and help push forward and hopefully get it, like if the Rust parser is in a good place, if we just need to like push it forward a little bit more into WASM into TypeScript, it's like at a place that I could potentially use it. So I was like, ooh, this feels like a good place to hop in and help out just a little bit. As much bandwidth as I possibly can give it, that is. But so they started work on, there was like the aisles, and then I'm looking for RS files here. I thought there was one more, model RS, and lib. So we got a bunch of Serde WASM Bindgen, and then the WASM Bindgen, I can never remember what these are called. Config macros? I don't know why I can never remember this. I've like literally every time we look at Rust on the stream, I forget what that's called. Like that syntax. But like as I was looking through this, I was like, functionally it works, and there's part of the way there, but there was some open questions that we were that just weren't getting answers enough to make folks feel confident in moving it forward. So I was like, okay. It seems like what we're trying to do here was the same that we already had in cooklang-ts. So there was / is this playground, and this playground, we've shifted stuff a little bit now, but the playground used to also have what's in this TypeScript repo, or TypeScript folder. And I'm looking at this and I'm like, in part, I think some of this Dubadub copied over just to get things going. Like if we sort of put these side by side, parse recipe, parse metadata, like this all seems to be very similar. So I imagine what happened is that we copied some of it over and then started building up from there. So it's like, if these are always going to be tied together, it feels like it makes sense to put them in the same repo, because then we can iterate on them at the same time. Because there's you work on the parser, and then you potentially need to do some like level of putting these functions or something on top of that and marking them as WASM Bindgen. Some of this you could potentially do directly in the library, but it seems like from what I've worked with WASM and WASM Bindgen that we're always going to end up having some like helper RS files on top of it. So I was like, if this stuff is all like heavily tied together, we can put it in the same repo. We can add a little bit of like niceties and stuff on top of it, and then I think that iteration will help move things forward. So we did I did some work in pulling stuff over from the playground into this TypeScript folder, and then I added these preview packages. Shout out to StackBlitz. They've got this neat little package implementation, GitHub app, whatever you want to call it, and it will publish to their custom registry that is npm compatible version of it. So every commit we get a new version, which is neat because then all the downstream users of this could open up a PR and just like immediately test it out in their implementation. So like we're talking about an Astra implementation. If somebody can make a change, we can be discussing this spec, or we can open up a PR and say, what about this syntax? And then folks can immediately like use it downstream. But on top of that, it also spins up the StackBlitz playground, which is neat because it runs in the browser. It does the web container. So not only can we like start discussing a thing, but we can like immediately see. Oh, and this one's actually broken, which comes back to, I didn't actually notice it was broken because it worked locally, and then for whatever reason, doing this stuff on my free time late at night, I didn't even notice it was broken. This person hopped in and moved a couple things around that I was actually kind of expecting to do myself. And then they fixed it. The fact that it was not loading correctly. It was loading locally, but in the published version, it wasn't. So now somebody can change the parser, change how it parses, like, the spec updates, or we have a suggestion, or we're discussing how it feels to use the thing. You could make a quick PR, get a thing immediately test, and just like share this in the channel. So then like this has my change. Now I can, write whatever I want here, and we see like what the parsed response is going to be. So I think that level of like iteration and discussion enhancing, I think is going to be really valuable, which is why I kind of pushed for it. So now with that in place, what we're going to do is we're going to go look at, there's a couple pieces that I want to look at today. Some of this is going to be like generic WASM Bindgen, because I've only done WASM Bindgen when we're taking a crate and putting it into like TypeScript world, in which like I don't have very direct control of that crate. We've for Covector, the package that we made to help publish both Rust and TypeScript in the polyglot monorepo that we use in the Tory land, we pulled the TOML parser from Rust and made a TypeScript of that, because the TypeScript or JavaScript implementations were missing features. The big one was that it wouldn't maintain the comments. So any comments that you put in TOML would end up being removed, which was not good. But in that case, we didn't have control over that TOML crate. We're mostly just taking that and running this like WASM pack and WASM Bindgen on top of it. So this will be, we'll look at a little bit of WASM Bindgen here. I think we'll probably be looking mostly at this versus what we have here now. So I think this librs here in cooklang-ts and in the PR, this librs, I think there's a lot of overlap here. And the we'll look at that overlap, but then I also want to compare what we have implemented in both of these to what we previously had in cooklang TypeScript. Because I think the open question is, they had a, maybe it was in this one. WASM version of the parser. I think it was this. So it's, there's a little bit of like an open question of like some of it is like lack of familiarity with WASM Bindgen, which is completely understandable. But like, I don't think technically anybody's struggling with it. It's just it's hard to know the options unless you know the options. And so like this ability to be able to like test and quickly iterate, I think is going to be helpful in answering the question of like, how do we actually want this thing to generate, and how does it feel like to use it in cooklang-ts or like in a TypeScript implementation. So I want to look at okay, so this is a what is this? It's a generated type doc. There we go. Type doc generated a thing, and I guess you can't see it, but it's down here. Right there. It says generated using TypeDoc. So TypeDoc takes the TypeScript and types and then generates this little doc thing. So this is the main README, and then it has all the different exported pieces. But what I wanted to do was basically compare what we had to what we now are looking at currently implemented in the Rust parser that's WASMed, and see basically like see what's missing, see how the interface does change, and if it's something that is good. Hey Moody, bro is cooking, right? Yeah. I appreciate the dad jokes. Really dig the work you guys are doing over at Tori. Nice. There's always so much to do there, and I always feel that bad that I'm not doing more, but also like it's nice to do other little things every once in a while. So little PRs here and there is nice in other projects. But speaking of cooking, I would like to do more of that in the Tori space. I especially want to get that CEF. I think CEF is going to be a big deal there. So getting that pushed forward, I think, is going to be like big. But that's like a whole separate rabbit hole that I was starting to dig myself into. So being able to have something like this to give myself a bit of a break from that is nice. Because all of this ends up being my free time. Okay, so I think we had this like this was the interface that we had before. We had recipe parser get image URL. So there's this like expectation that you have metadata, and there's this. So like if you squint, this is like front matter and markdown, and this is the markdown content, and like this ends up being the syntax, like the markdown syntax. Esc, air quotes, etc., etc. Conceptually, it's that. It's very much not though. Like this is not front matter typical. Like this isn't. I don't think this is YAML compliant. And like this this piece ends up getting parsed here into, like a list of ingredients. And like here, pound symbol or hash, or depending on what generation you are, number sign blender, it ends up getting dumped into a list for cookwares. And then metadata includes all of this. So like you write it like this, which then you potentially have like unit, you have unit conversion, but also like 1,5 doesn't mean the same thing in Europe as it does in, or at least some parts of Europe, as it does in North America. I would expect that to be 1.5 cups, not 1,5. So like parsing is like a whole thing. um, and like this is why like having one canonical parser, I think, is going to be helpful, because there's a lot of these like little edge cases and everything, and if it's all consistent, that will really be beneficial. You really kind of want to start contributing, to be honest. You've been programming for over 20 years now, but haven't really done much open source. I mean, honestly, like, I'm gonna say go for it, but I've also just gone for it. Some of it is it's potentially a different type of thinking or way that you approach it. If you've done programming more as a like functionally just as a job, a thing that somebody tells you the things you need to do, I mean, you've been programming for 20 years, so you probably past the like junior level, I take a ticket and I do ticket level work. But like nobody's telling you what to do in open source. So like I saw this situation where it felt like things were kind of stuck, and I had ideas in my head for ways to potentially unstick it. I hopped in the Discord and I basically started discussing it. Like it's the same thing that I do. My current employer is front side software. I'm functionally, it's the same thing that I'm doing there. I'm discussing, doing like IC architect level work of like getting the buy-in and discussing and understanding what the issues are, and determining how we can best solve them, and then like putting a plan and starting to implement it. And all of those pieces aren't something that I necessarily need to do. But like just talking about it and identifying it sometimes is enough to like get the gears rolling. So if you're interested in Tori or here, a good place to always look at is docs. Docs are always a great place to look. And actually, here, let's question on OSS. I actually completely forgot to do my little to-do list here. So we're going to go like this. I'll have to fix the timestamp on that later, but you've always been self-taught and created your own projects for the most part, and just went and did lots of client projects. Nice. Yeah, I mean, honestly, like that get up and go is a big part of like being able to hop into a project and just provide value. Because functionally, if you're going to get involved with a project, folks are never going to say no to you making things better. And that's a great way, is if you can propose value and then implement value, everybody's going to say yes, join the team and make it official, please. I specifically in Tori, the docs are always going to be a great place to jump into, because Tori is a huge project. I got involved a long time ago, so it was not, I mean, it was still of a decent size then, because the scope was big. But I got involved at a point where it was sort of in the same way, like packaging these things up and publishing them was a pain point, and the whole CI/CD. And I was like, I know how to do that. this is a neat project. Let me help you with that. And now, I don't know, I've been on the board for what, like 6 years now or something? I don't even remember. But yeah. Docs are probably a great place to start because there's that's the one of the places that people are vocal about. And so one of the places that are potentially easy to fix, especially if you've been using Tori and you have some knowledge of like how things work, just making that clear in the docs is a huge win. So there's a, if you do the Discord thing, hop in the Discord and there's a contributing channel. Start chatting in there, and I try to pay attention as much as I have time. But we're always interested in folks getting involved with that. And yes, I did. I got a Voyager. It took a little bit to get used to it, but like not too bad. I've typed on not split keyboards, but ergonomic in the past. So like it wasn't a huge wake up. Well, I don't know if wake up call is the right word, but like I knew what I was getting into. We'll put it that way. It was in part because like I was having tendon or back, I don't know, something was going on where I was getting tingly fingers, and I was like, you know what? Adjusting how I sit and how I like address my keyboard is potentially going to be helpful here. So that I was always like just out of curiosity interested, but that was like enough to be a trigger to jump into it. And I don't know, it's there's still keys that I struggle with, and I put this up here in part because there's like things that I haven't actually bound yet that I use like once a week, and I don't realize I use it, and I go to use it that one time that week, and then realize I don't have a key that I can actually press to do it. Like zooming in here as we're talking about this, let's clone this down and open up VS Code, because do I have? No, I don't. Make directory cooklang. Most of the contributions I've done for this project. Speaking of which, I want to zoom in here. How do I do that? We would normally do like Control Plus, I think it is. But if I go onto this layer, my plus is over here. But now I have bound, I can do this. What is that, Windows key? And that's the other thing too. I daily my Mac more because that's Mac is my work keyboard. Or excuse me, I do most of my daytime job stuff on my Mac. I stream on Windows. So this is different. I have a layout for, this is currently my Windows layout. I can also switch to, this is technically my Mac layout, but it's on Windows, so it shows the Windows keys. So those are normally like command, I think it is. So, okay, how do I zoom in? I want to do Control plus plus, I guess. So I can do this. It is plus plus, right? I think I can also do, I got a left control down there. I can also do this, just scroll wheel. But like it's those kind of things. Those are the things I haven't picked up on yet. Because like I just do the keybind on my other keyboard. I honestly have, is it Alt? I honestly have no idea what the key combination is. Maybe it is Alt. So if I do left Alt plus plus, I thought it was plus. Oh, that's not it. Oh, that's not it. I don't even know how to undo that, honestly. This, nope. Close and reopen. So like that's the stuff that I haven't quite gotten a hang of yet. I can type and I can do the stuff I normally need to do, but there's a couple keybinds that I haven't quite memorized yet. And I mean, I had the motions memorized on my other keyboard, and since I had that like habitual motion memorized, I didn't retain the actual key combination in my head anymore, which meant that there's some keybinds and such that I have no idea how to do. So that's that's where I'm at with the Voyager. I feel like I'm like 85% there, and I started trying out the home roll mod stuff, but haven't quite got there yet. Okay, so let's do. I also this is gonna be like way out of order, but whatever. We're looking at cooklang-ts versus RS. I think we can call that done. And then what we're going to do now is we're going to, like functionally, the PR in cooklang-ts is equivalent-ish enough to, I think, what we have in cooklang-rs. So I think what we're going to do here is we're going to compare the API of TS to new RS WASM. And then we're just going to like double check and see how they're different. And that's where we're going to start. So we'll do this and open up here. And we got to zoom in again because I opened up a new window. And close, whatever. We can update you all later. Typescript. So we got Rust doing its thing. My computer fans are kicking in here. Most of like if we pull up the WASM Bindgen docs, I guess we leave this open. So WASM Bindgen. We, without a bundler, so there's potentially a bundler going to be in the mix, and just by the fact that we make a target web doesn't mean that we can't also dump it through a bundler. It just means that it's like a bundler is not required. So I think in this case that's appropriate, and that's what we've done. And we have set up, if we do an npm I, this will install the root package JSON, and we have using wiret to do a little bit of lifting because WASMPack doesn't actually have a like watch script, which is kind of annoying. Speaking of places to get involved, WASMPack has been one of those things that has been great to see evolve, but also it's such a base level thing that I think people kind of just expect it to exist, and it just hasn't seen nearly at the attention that I think it needs to. So like this is the stuff here. Like on Rust exports, we can do there. So like these bits are the things that aren't like, unless you've done a whole ton of it, knowing all of this API surface off the top of your head is not easy. So this is the thing that like we want to make it easy to iterate basically. So if we do npm run playground now, we should get after WASMPack runs, a version of, let's hope I got this whole build script set up now. we're getting a build of the WASM, and then it's going to run the playground, and the playground's got a main.ts, styles.ts, and then it's all dumped into this index.html. You tried the you wish there was a way to auto compile WASM when making changes to it. Yeah. Yeah, so like there's been issues and folks not recommending is what's a better word, making suggestions. I don't know. There's been issues around having a watch mode on WASM pack, but it just nothing is landed. So the and like yeah, the Vite WASM pack plugin is if you're not using Vite, then it doesn't really work. And you still have to have the command to run it like kicking around. So what we ended up just doing is I pulled in a package called WireIt, which allows you to do like I marked the playground as a service. So when I run playground, this service starts up, and then I listed the WASM watch as a dependency. And now basically anytime these target files change, if I did it right, then it will rerun the WASM pack, and then I think it restarts this. So we should have, if we go to 5173, basically a version of this playground running. 5173. Array, nice to have you. Good to see you. You're currently building plotting software for an oil drilling company using WASM, plotters, and Tori. Nice. There's Wired is fine. There's a couple of like runners or what have you. I think Wired actually has a list of them here in their docs. I believe it was their docs. Yeah, here, related tools. NX and Turbo repo. If you've done a lot with monorepos, those probably have surfaced in your sphere of knowledge. They just seemed a little heavy-handed for what I wanted to do here. And then Chomp is a little bit newer thing, also written in Rust. But there's a few folks that I have seen working on other projects that are working on this, but WireIt seemed to be sufficient enough for what we needed. Gets the job done. Yeah, Chomp, love the name. The little dinosaur too is nice. They definitely got the marketing done well on that. So this works. Like it runs the thing, we get the playground, and it shows up here. Cool. So now what we want to look at is we have now a some of this is like laced in with like this is code very much intended just to power the playground. But also this is like a good example because it's functionally one of the ways you can use the output of like this WASM build. And that's why I was like, wait, we got the thing ready. How about we just do it? So basically it's like vanilla.js. It's running this function, debounces for the form. We'll have a bunch of like vanilla.js-y type bits where we're getting things and then running JavaScript on those. So in the URL bar, we're pulling information out of it. So you can like change different pieces about it, some of which are done through here. So like in more options, you can tweak some of these bits, and then it shows up in the URL, which is nice because then when you share this URL, that person would have these like extensions and such changed, turned on, or adjusted as you also did. The meat and the potatoes, I think though, is the parse. So we're listening for changes in that field and then running parse. It's not like super functional programming, but like it gets the job done. Hear this. This is like a listener to update in the extensions, and at each one of these, it's running parse. So like at the end of the day, we got a bunch of functions. Each of those end up triggering a parse, but on like first load, it focuses the editor and then parses. So the meat and the potatoes of like what all this is doing is running the parse based off of whatever like state you've selected. Functional enough. Yeah. It's like it's not functional, but it's functional enough. It's not functional as in functional programming, but like it's functional as in it gets the job done. So the I mean, at some point there like it might potentially make sense to do an example for I don't know that like doing an example for an integration with an Obsidian would be worthwhile. But like in Astro or somebody putting it on their website implementation, like something that does this might potentially be a good example because how you use them and how you care about dealing with that parsed code changes a little bit potentially. So you can see that effectively what we're doing based off of the input. So editor get value. So this is the input, whatever you're writing on the left here. That input ends up being passed to the state.parse. And we have parse full, parse events, parse AST, parse render, and parse standard metadata. It's not Haskell, but it works. What is standard metadata actually? Okay, so that would be like the little bits on the top. So we could do something like I think it's something like this. Yeah, and then it's got the errors on warnings. And is that do I see some yet and yet Matt yet? Is that how you say it? I feel like I'm mispronouncing it. Cargo tumble. Here we go. Pretty please. That's gotta no, that's not what it is. Saturday, you know, this error maybe. That error format looks familiar, and I thought it might have been. There is a crate called this, I believe. Well, RS. Yeah, this. It looked a little bit like that. Missing separator. So like this is the like the control over the parsing and the error messages I think is like huge. And I think that's why the Rust implementation will end up being really nice. It's an old awkward format. Now it's just YAML front matter. Oh, the also, hey, good to see you. I'm assuming that's Alexi behind the cooklang. I assume you mean the like the pointy boys, as it were, or the pointy parentheses. So now it's literally just like would be source author. I don't know what the source website. Closed errors. Nothing. I've got. Do I have Discord open? Yes. It's YouTube chat might squash some stuff if you need to drop links or code blocks or something like that, feel free to like DM me or do something on Discord. I'll try to either just let me know in the chat or that you sent it, and if I don't notice it. But if things don't come across in the chat, try Discord instead. So like if we do doop 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 and source, whoop, this, replace the entries, oh nice, it does say it's deprecated. Use YAML front matter. Okay, so then in that case, I think it's expecting something like this. Do we need that at the beginning? Yeah, there we go. Cool. Yeah. So boop boop. There we go. So I think that like we have a render, we have a full parse, we have events. And like this, how you use a recipe changes based off the context, which I think is really what makes in part this project interesting. So like a recipe will have content and metadata, and what pieces of that are valuable. Like there's pieces of it that will be more valuable depending on the context. If I'm cooking, I might do some prep work ahead of time, to where all I need to do is dump stuff in. So the thing that I really care about when I'm actually cooking then is just the steps. Like, what do I need to do next? So being able to parse it and like show the different pieces separately ends up being potentially a really like I think there's a bunch of like neat use cases there. But then like a list of ingredients when you're going shopping is all you really need. You don't need the steps. So like that's the different use cases for like having these different pieces of metadata here. So like this is nice for like displaying on a site. I can add this metadata and have it like call back to where I got this from and et cetera, et cetera. And like tags are nice for searching or like pulling up or filtering. Like when I'm choosing which recipe to make for the week to do, I'm planning my shopping and what I want to eat this week, having tags or the time are potentially things that I would want to be filtering or thinking about. Okay, so the render. What are we doing with the render? So this is when we get then to the, and this is where I was like, it feels like we can kind of just split this up because the playground was doing a bunch of pieces, which functionally makes sense the way they originally set it up. But we had a whole bunch of work that was done that we could kind of just pull out and use in different contexts. So like at the end of the day, we have a state.parse something. So it's like just calling these generic functions. So there's a new state. Yeah. So like some of this is like we would look at the Rust WASM. So like JS name, JS class. Here we have a pub struct JS foo. That potentially makes sense for the code in Rust. But I think those are potentially also a case where you don't really want to be exporting from Typescript a thing called JS foo. So like having a different class name or a different JS name might make sense. So here we have a state. Like state doesn't, it probably makes sense in the parser. It doesn't make nearly as much sense, I think, in the context of like a thing I want to import. So like there's an init. I'm curious what the init does. Version. Okay, so version would just be like the version number. So like this, the actual API is the stuff that we want to dig into a little bit and be able to like iterate on that. So like state would probably make sense to be a thing that we would rename in my mind, because and you can see all of these functions. We got functions here that are then we're basically just like exporting this whole thing. So we actually have an impl state. So we have build parser. Some of this also starts to get into the like, is it impl state because we are, is that what is defined upstream in the actual main crate? So there's cooklang-ast, build ast, source report. We have a prelude. But we don't have anything that's actually impl state. Like I kind of wonder if we could actually just rename that. But I think to start, it's less state and more of a just like a parser. And some of this you can actually rename when you where did that go? I guess we basically want to do change it, but like you could do like an as something. So like, is state really the thing that makes sense there? It's sort of like a parser as parser. So it, like in reality, we could then rename this to be parser, and like that in my mind makes more sense. And then we would say a, where's the, I do this so seldom. Rename symbol, yeah, parser. So like that feels like it makes more sense in my head. In which case we could then go, if that's what we want to do, we could just straight away do it here with this JS class, and we can call that parser. In which case, hopefully this works where it does a rebuild, and we should be able to then, it's doing some spinny stuff. It's a little bit small, but I think you can see it. Once the rebuild is done, I'm expecting this to say, hey, that's no longer valid. I'm actually curious, if we reload this, is it going to complain at us? And this is the other bit. Getting it implemented with wired and whatnot is a thing. But then like getting all the edge cases working with it is potentially a whole nother level of like stuff to deal with. And like that was one of the things that I missed when we were setting up the playground originally, that the last PR we looked at, they fixed it. It worked locally at one point. I think it worked in the playground in the StackBlitz web container, but then I didn't go back and check it again after I made a different change. So there's lots of potentially moving pieces and like getting a thing built. Ideally having tests for all of this was nice, but also like just the fact that we went through all the effort of building it and getting it into a preview package means that that's hopefully not going to be an issue once you actually go to publish the crate. Because getting this thing, WASM is cool because you can build off the Rust implementation, and WASM is cool just as like a base level thing that you can generate to. But like getting it published in a package that ends up going to npm is kind of involved, and like getting all the little pieces correct on the first try is unlikely to happen. So the fact that we went through all of that pain in setting up the preview package hopefully means that we won't actually run into any issues when we actually go to publish. So once we feel good about what is showing up in the preview package, in theory, you just run that same build script and publish to the real npm, and then it's just like it should theoretically work. So the preview packages is a really nice way to like de-risk this whole publishing a WASM thing. Okay, so why is this not JS class? Is it? Yeah, it's on an impl. WASM Bindgen constructor. Yep. Okay. Getter setters. So this makes sense. It's basically saying like, hey, this is going to be a getter and this is going to be a setter. So like it will end up generating certain code to then do that. I'm guessing because those functions are part of a class, you don't need to actually do any decorating, because the impls end up becoming a class. So we make a parser, and that parser then has these functions attached to it. So like that function, you basically the reason there's like a class and a constructor, like some of this is just it's how it was in Rust, implemented in Rust, so that's how it ends up coming out. But like I think it does make sense to have it as a class. You do a constructor because then you have a parser, which you can then change like the units or the extensions on that parser. So then anytime you call parse, it's just like that's all already set. It's likely that the extensions or the units or whatever that you have when you're running a parse, it's probably going to be the same for every parse thereafter. So if I'm doing a whole bunch of recipes, it's likely that whatever I would want to choose for my extensions, units, etc., all of my recipes will end up following that. So I think it makes sense as like an API to be this. Set up a parser, and then we basically just call these parse functions on it. I think like parse render does. I don't know if like this API directly makes sense, but like having a render function or at least like a render to string kind of actually makes sense to me. The like you could almost render it to potentially have a couple different like render targets. So like this is, I think, doing a little bit more. Ooh. Oh, hey. We got an error. Like I want this to work. So why is this not working is the question. And we might need to double check that. I thought I would restart Vite or restart something that would end up pointing appropriately. cooklang-ts. It should be showing up here. It might be that we need to adjust something else in our WASM. Oh, you know what? WASM bindgen pub struct state. I wonder if it's struct. If you have to update the struct too. That might be why that's not actually updating. Indicate that all methods inside an impl block should be attached to the specific class. Oh. Oh, yep. We need to also do this. That's the piece that we were missing. Okay, there we go. So now that hopefully should rebuild, and then this will end up fixing itself. So if the wire setup and everything and the watcher is working as expected, I would expect this only takes a couple seconds, and then this should just like squiggly line should go away. If it isn't or doesn't, then that means we potentially need to like deal with things. So it is an error in Vite. I don't know how it's going to. I would expect it to try to reload it. I mean, it says reload. It does seem to be like throwing an error, so I think stuff is not loading correctly here. So it's possible this the WASM pack thing is not running as I would be expecting it to, or like rerunning is probably the bigger issue. So we might need to look at that. We'll put a pin in it. But in the meantime, let's just let's try redoing it. Also, like watch scripts are fundamentally different on Linux/Mac versus Windows. I tested and set this all up on my Mac. First time I'm running it on Windows, it's possible that it could just be like a Windows issue. Okay, so what we were talking about, we were looking at the parser render, right? I think it does make sense to have some sort of like string output, but then there's parse AST, events, and then full. I'm assuming full just has everything. Metadata, sections, ingredient. It looks like it, yeah. So like potentially parse full could just be like, I mean, it could just be parse. I don't know how often you're actually going to need a case, or there's going to be a case where we need just a parse of the events or just the metadata. I mean, potentially. But also, like, if you're going through the effort of doing a full parse, it might not actually matter. Events in AST was for debugging while developing the parser. Yeah, for sure. And to be clear, oh, hey, nice, good to see you, friend/Z. I haven't actually said this out loud. Zioni. Let me know if I'm mispronouncing that. We literally copy and pasted your work, or like shifted it over. So like this is very much built specifically for the playground. But now we're like building on top of your effort, which is great. Like having a foundation is something to look at. I think is really great. So like I think it does potentially still have value to have some of these, if only for debugging, like ongoing debugging. But if so, like those might just make sense to keep around, but I don't know that. Like I have a suspicion that most folks are just going to be using a parse directly. So like making that a little bit more top level might make sense. So like I think it potentially makes sense to keep most of the work that you did. We've got a render standard. Like I have a feeling it probably makes sense to keep most of these around, but I have a suspicion that we'll end up wanting to shift these a little bit. And I think this is actually a good place to, presuming we do want to shift them a little bit. What is here actually? Now we're going to compare WASM, Bindgen, and librs. That's kind of what we looked at. We didn't actually compare stuff. So let's do that now. What time are we working with here? Okay. Just double checking to make sure I don't have any other messages. We got probably about 30-ish minutes, maybe a little bit longer. So like if we look at the previous implementation, we had recipe, parser, and get image URL, and it seems like a Bindgen equals cool. Yeah, I mean, and this is the who mentioned it in the cooklang Discord. Somebody else said they were, yeah, Kaylee they seem like they know more about the Rust side of things. I'm hoping between the handful of us, sort of like iterating on this, we can get into it a little bit more, because and like get a good feeling API coming out of this. Because I think some of the, coming back to WASM Bindgen being cool, my gut reaction is that I don't think we actually need to do all of this. We might. It might still be worthwhile. And also, I will be the first to admit I haven't looked too deeply into the actual Rust implementation of the cooklang stuff. But I can pull up another project that I had been doing similar things with. Where is, what was I looking at? Oh, cargo.toml. So we have Serday JSON. The mount, I think, is just for the shoot, what is it? I remember opening this up last time. Where, here, view crate. Copy. Open. Oh, template engine. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. I would say I remember opening that up last time. I don't. Is that actually used in here? I don't know that that's actually used anymore. We might be able to remove that. But the here, let's actually put a quick pin in it. I want to come back to the render from Serday, because I know coming back to mentioning Kaylee, they said that they were deep into the understandings of Serday, and deep is a good way to describe it, because it is definitely that. But there's another project I've worked on in the past that I've got in the back of my head that I want to come to, which had Serday, had data like within a Serday type, and then you can use the other Serday crates to go back and forth between stuff. And I think I was doing that to render directly to Markdown. So we might be able to use something like that to give us more options as far as like render targets. So rather than like it might still make sense to do this whole, oh, you do use it here. Here it is. So this is basically giving us like HTML. Yeah. Okay. Now I see it. Yep. Now that I look closer, H2 UL. So like this ends up giving us HTML. We might be able to leverage some of the Serday, the other Serday crates, like the ecosystem level stuff, to, rather than manually doing this, basically just give it a thing that's in a Serday type and say, hey, give me the other Serday equivalent. So we might be able to get like a Markdown render or some other options quickly going that route. So we got, let's see, we have parse, and you do it. We've got a little bit of that already because we're doing the Serday JSON. So we have parse AST, and like functionally, we've got a pull parser events. For E in events, we're writing format AST. Parse full AST. Where's pull parser come from? Okay. So I'm guessing like pull parser is named as such because it's just pulling out a part of it. Events. Okay, so events go into the build AST. Parse render and standard metadata. Okay, parse metadata. So we have like in the actual implementation, just a like overall parser. So like in theory, we could potentially just use this parse full for everything. So I think that will like the if I can hope for it, I have a feeling that Kaylee might be able to help us with the Serity ecosystem level stuff, to where potentially we can have like just the parser, and then the parser goes into Serity, and then we have options for like Serity handling things coming out, and then it might save us from having to write a bunch of this code potentially. But we want to look at the APIs. That's I'm getting myself distracted here. So we had the class recipe. Previously, we had the class recipe and class parser. So class recipe ends up giving us, so like this is in some ways like the full parse, and it's got this private parser built into it. So like if you look at this list of properties, we have cookwares, ingredients, metadata, shopping list, steps. If we look here, metadata, sections, ingredients, cookware, timers. So like the spec has evolved a little bit. And this is part of why I'm have some personal interest in this, is because the spec in the Rust parser has progressed further than the TypeScript version. So getting those in line is, one of my personal interests. But you can kind of see that this full parse is very much equivalent to what we get from the recipe class. So I think you can kind of say recipe is functionally equivalent to what we get from full parse. And then we have parser. And that is kind of like the constructor thing, where it takes options and you can set some of the defaults, and then it gives you the ability to do the parse. So I think what we have, and what I'll say Fran, because that's what you are in the chat. I think what you have is even just that full parse, or parse full. I think that covers most of what we actually had in this parser and recipe. The get image URL is, I think that is potentially something that we might need. But that is more of like a direct, like in some ways that's kind of the same. It would just end up being another function, I imagine. So we have parse full, parse render. Like it would just be a, get. It's like a partial parse almost, is kind of what I'm imagining. And then we get all the interfaces. I'm guessing it's probably not going to be worthwhile to dig into the interfaces, just because those are going to change. And I say that in part because the spec has changed, but also because the WASM Bindgen process should generate a bunch of that for us. So that being said, I'm going to cross this one off. I want to look at how much time we got. TypeScript. TypeScript type output. My drag and drop in this is awkward. It bothers me every time I drag and drop. Following the spec can now get the image from recipe meta image. Yeah, so no need for another function. Does that come out of the I'm guessing that comes out of the full parse? The self parser parse? I think it might potentially still make sense to have another function on the JavaScript / TypeScript side of things, if only because the use cases in rendering are slightly different. Because like depending on how you end up using it, where you need the image might end up being at like a whole different level or a different section of the code relative to like rendering the actual content. So having those, like the image itself or that metadata might be at a separate level. But like honestly, I mean, if it's in meta, like maybe just a generic metadata is going to be fine. Maybe that's what you're saying, Fran. If that's the case, then I think I agree. I think you're right. We just have a metadata and it's just available on the metadata. Yeah, it makes sense. So yes, let's check the TypeScript. We should be, because I think I toggled on the thing. Where did I do that? We have two. Yeah, we have two options that we're setting when we do this, or two script commands rather. The build and watch, and they're similar. The main thing between the watch versus the build is the build will happen when you do an install, which means that when you do an npm install, which is a requirement, so that means that you'll get an install. So we can do a watch with a no install, which saves us 10 seconds every time. So that's why we got this in the watch script, because the dev and that no install makes that process happen faster. But otherwise, they're the same. They're doing the target web. And I think previously we had TypeScript turned off because it wasn't required because we were only doing JavaScript. But now we're bundling in a package. So I removed that arg so we do get TypeScript. This is probably going to be the other place that we will end up needing to spend a few cycles. Because, yeah, what we have coming out is pretty generic. Which, to be clear, I just want to say, like, I'm not being critical of anybody's work, both for Fran and Alexi, but like anybody else watching, all of this is incremental and a process, and TypeScript wasn't turned on before, so I wouldn't expect any of this to look nice. So I'm not being critical as in like what you did before was wrong. If it sounds like that, I apologize. That is not the intent. I just want to make that clear that like I love the foundation and this is just ongoing progress. So I'm just, we're like going through and identifying the places that like where we're at right now and where we could potentially go. So I think, I guess that kind of comes back to if we look at the docs real quick, I don't remember if there's anything specifically on TypeScript type here. Custom section allows us to use TypeScript declarations. Interesting. I don't know if this is going to be the way to do it or not. This feels awkward. But like, so we've got this struct. I think what ends up happening is we be a little bit more intentful about the structs that we have in the librs or like exposed, because we end up getting, so we get this fallible result, which is, where's that show up? Here, value error. So like from the implementation that we were doing before, this makes sense. But I think this is probably the place where we massage a little bit more, because now that we split these out into separate use cases, we will have a the struct that is coming out of it. I think we want to put a little bit more effort into, because we want this to, at least in spirit, look similar to these interfaces, and they like the types. So we'll end up getting like a metadata with these. Oh well, maybe more than that, but like ingredient. We'll want to represent that, I think, in the structs, so that the parsed output will give us something useful to work with. And I suspect that this is actually, I think, kind of where it comes back to the Saturday stuff, because I imagine you've already done a lot of that work. Like if we look at maybe in lib at some of the types, bit flags. So we got the new parser. Here's the parse options, and you get a recipe result. So like scalable recipe. Where's that? Oh, there we go. Servings. Yeah, so like in Model RS, we've got metadata sections, and like all of these already got some types associated with them. Like, yay for strict typing. And okay, so we got a Saturday YAML, and it is just generic here. What is our? I guess a bunch of these are gonna end up being potentially generic as far as like ingredient, no, but like metadata could potentially be anything, I guess, right? I haven't looked super close at the spec. The spec might end up describing some of this, but I imagine that we can build on top of what okay, metadata. I guess it just is generic metadata. It might, honestly, I could be convinced that we have some standard metadata values. Title and tags feel like something that could be standardized, and like they're optional, but there's some expectation that they might exist. But I definitely see how we can potentially, okay, here. Yeah, conventions. Okay. I wonder if some of this makes sense to actually like define in the struct. Okay, so we have some previous work as far as the spec understanding goes, to where are we going? Here. Metadata could potentially be more than just a record string. So I think like what are we at 11:30? We probably, this would be the next thing that would be worth poking, is my guess, because we are currently getting out and maybe tweaking the interface a little bit. Like some of these might make sense as internal pieces, or like parse AST, parse full. We might be able to rely more on Saturday, which we'll look at in a couple minutes here. But if we're just returning the parser, we could potentially do more with, rather than doing a fallible result, we could actually return what it is. Because did we look up, where does that show up? Oh yeah, that's struct. Value and error, and like it makes sense because we're basically just rendering a string at that point. We have a parse full, this should be a string for this specific use case. But I think what ends up happening is we tweak this class. We could probably rename it. It looks like we can rename it. And then this stuff shifts into a like a JSON equivalence or something first, and then we have a like toString method on that. And then those toString methods end up being what we use here to render. But I think Cerde can actually do a lot of the lifting for us here. Because like, so fallible result, we are doing a parseful. So value ends up giving us a string. We're matching on recipe. So if it is JSON, then we give us the thing. Otherwise, we just output the format. And then like error case, basically. So the output from like doing the self parser is an option recipe. Which we're then converting into a string. So when we talk about, yes, exactly. Fallible result was mostly, that's a good way to say it. And true. Fallible result was mostly to format the pretty errors to string in the Rust side. I guess also, the errors too. That is a very good point. Because as you're typing in a playground, you're going to hit these other use cases, in which case the fallible result needs to handle that. So when we get to, what's that struct look like again? Fallible result. So we get value and error. And that likely translates here where we say these bits. So we render the output in text content, and then we render the error in errors in HTML. So that's where like this is the text content and this is the error. So we will there's going to be like the playground implementation, and then there's going to be the like this is the actual API. So I think some of this will end up being and this is I think what Dubba was starting to do in the WASM PR in Cooklang Typescript was like taking this work, using the parser, and then rather than just returning a string with this dealing with the value versus error, just for like returning the content basically. But we still potentially need an error. What does the error situation look like? So what does recipe return? It returns a recipe. It seems like we haven't really dealt with it being an error or not. I wonder if it just throws. To cooklang. Oh yeah, okay. Generates a cooklang string. Interesting. So is that the reverse? That must be the reverse. Generates a new recipe from the supplied. Okay. So when we call new recipe, that gives us the optional string. Sources optional? Type aliases, get image URL. So parser makes sense. Yeah, and then source is a string. So recipe. Why is recipe the source? I guess I don't care that much. In either way, we're going. I think it makes sense to have like a parser, and you can always like rename it to like cooklang parser or something like that. But then this ends up getting shifted. Like I think some of this ends up getting pulled into the playground basically, where we I think we still need to deal with error conditions in the library. And yeah, I don't think we need to be very attached to old interface. Yeah, that makes sense. And I the reason I wanted to look to see what the old interface had was just to see that we were like kind of in the same spirit, in the same place. And I think that is holding true. Like that's, what did you do in, what did we all have in here? This is a good place to look at this implementation. So you're doing a parse recipe. That's about as much as you got. Okay. Yeah, so like it seems like we can mostly just do like this, right? So parse will give us a recipe result. And that gives us a recipe. What's the report? Source report. That comes from that report crate, I presume. Here. Oh. New value report input. So report is where the errors show up. I see. So it almost feels like we need to in spirit represent this in the API, and then what ends up getting used in the playground just gets tweaked a little bit. So like instead of outputting as a string, that might just be an additional function. So we end up getting like a parsed recipe back with potentially errors. And then when we get here, that ends up being translating into this. So rather than it being a value that comes back, it might just be like a recipe. So like we have a recipe and an error, and then the recipe would have a recipe to string potentially. Or events to string or something like that. And then that would represent basically what you're doing here, which is why I think this is a really good foundation, because like you did a lot of the work. We just need to shift things around a little bit, I think. So I think some of that is just getting the TypeScript stuff wired up here to where we don't need to actually, like if we did, okay, so we have a parser. I'm also curious what the init does. I think with the web, we don't need to actually do that anymore, right? Let's try that actually real quick. Because there's if you do the one version, you need to initialize, because it brings the initialization stuff along with. But I don't know that that's actually required anymore. Doesn't seem to be breaking. I'm gonna rerun this just to be certain. Yeah, see, like I don't know if this is a wired thing. I think this is a wire it, where on Windows it doesn't. It still seems to be running. It hasn't. I hit Control C. I have to hit it again to actually like stop it. But if it's killing the WASM pack process, that's probably fine. Okay. That appears to be running. I don't think we need the init anymore. I think I'm pretty certain with without a bundler. So here's the targets. We've got under reference deployment, we've got bundler, web, Node.js, Dino, no modules. We were doing Node.js before, and we needed a loadable loadable via require as a Node.js common.js module. But I think like, or no, it was a bundler. We were doing bundler before. So with a bundler, it is not natively implemented in any implementation. You have to need a bundler. Okay. One of these needed that init. I don't think you need it without the bundler. I don't see any mention of the init here though. Init? Initialize it. Okay. It requires manual initialization of the WASM. So maybe the web version you do have to initialize, but we were doing it before. We'll put a pin on that. I think we can potentially, can this here can this be removed? So if it would be nice to get rid of the init. Version makes sense to either way, I think. Once we initialize the parser, then we do a parser dot, probably just like a parser dot parse, right? Okay, we got about 5-10 more minutes. So like this will end up giving us a recipe. We can probably just call Saturday JSON on this directly. So if we do like a parse, and we want to return a if some JSON, so bool, so recipe is a option recipe. So I want to return a, what is, I don't remember what Saturday JSON returns. Like I don't need the fallible result. I do potentially need the error still, but honestly, like we'll deal with that in a second. So if we just do like this, oh, this, nope, that, this, and this will give us still a string though. So Saturday JSON to value. I think we can just do to value recipe. What does this look like? Mismatch types. We found a result of Saturday JSON value error. That makes sense. So if we do this, what does this actually give us when we get to? Yeah, okay. WASM stuff. Dot unwrap. And this will end up giving us a, if we do let, I mean, I don't really, so recipe is, okay, value equals this. Nope. And we want to unwrap that. Let's just see if we can get the value logged out. So this will end up giving us a value. Now if we do, oh, I guess that's all we really need. To value, unwrap, value. Because unwrap hole is not going to handle there. That makes sense. So this, I think I can change to this, to this. WASM describe is not satisfied. Yes. Okay. This is actually a really good spot to. Some of this might end up because we're like getting out of time here. I'll see if I can do this off stream. So like if we can start doing some of these like steps incrementally, we can do a parse. I don't know what we need the JSON for. Parse. JSON checkbox. What's this for? Oh, if it is JSON or not. Okay. Yeah, I don't think we actually need that in there. If I can get this working, logging out, that might be like a good first step. And we can kind of just do this incrementally and get like pieces shifted over to the point where at some point we'll be ready to be like, it's in a spot where we want to actually do a full publish, or at least a publish of like an alpha version. So I think I'll see if I can get that parse working. Then we'll want to, if I need to fix this type, but I think that comes back to let's pull up this other project real quick. Some of this is, let's see. We will Chris. Oh no, it's Christopher, I think. Piscardi. I think we were doing output, but this didn't go through WASM, so that's like a whole nother level. We'll need to do Saturday stuff, and then we'll need to like get the WASM Bindgen to be okay with that. So whatever comes out ends up being in a format, and we need WASM Bindgen to be okay with that. But what we were doing here was, so this, we were making an API call to DeepGram to generate like captions from audio. And I think we pushed it up. Main RS captions, I guess. So we have a SRT, which is the file format. There's some editor tools in here, and it does we're doing some mapping over, and then we end up getting this SRT channels. And channels is a vec string. Vec. Did I open up a PR? I might have actually like gotten to the point where I even pushed it. Can we open it up real quick? How much time we got? A couple minutes. And this. We'll see how much uncommitted code I have on this branch. Here we go. Yeah, Markdown. So this Markdown ends up returning. Oh, so I just did a struct. There is. Let's see, response. I was thinking that I had Saturday, that we had Saturday in the mix here, but in reality, we're just calling format on this too. So we're actually doing similar to what you're doing, Fran. I was thinking that we had Saturday here. Okay, so this is not going to be an example like I was hoping it would be. This is a CLI. So when you run the CLI, you get options, of which, yeah, if you specify Markdown as an option, then it'll write out that file. But it is coming out of the, same for these other like caption formats. Basically, it's writing out a file. But we were mostly just using iter tools, and then returning string and vec string, and then those strings would be just the formatted things. So we're doing format. So actually similar to what you're doing, just you were doing the HTML equivalent. So if we look at just Saturday, I think Saturday has a list of them on their homepage, maybe. So the big thing is like there's a serialize and a deserialize, and then we want to we basically want to like provide other options. So like we have a parser, and once you've parsed the thing into a recipe, having like a 2 markdown or a 2 string or a 2 HTML would be handy. And I think that is applicable both for so like here's the Saturday YAML. I think we're already using that to do the parsing of stuff, right? But this would be used. You could both pull in and then write out, I believe. Is there a Saturday like Saturday HTML? Strong to fast XML. Well, that's not very helpful. HTML format, I don't think is what we're looking for. Yeah, okay, so that's Saturday for that payload type for forms. I mean, I guess serialize as a number. I thought there was some Saturday libs that we could basically just add. We might need to still do some wiring and use Saturday as like the interface. Implementing serialize. So it might end up showing up in like a deserialize or something. Saturday, I want like an ecosystem. They've got like an ecosystem thing somewhere, don't they? I could have sworn they did. Here, data formats. So like JSON is probably going to be the biggest one, and like we're already using the Saturday JSON. So I think and well like this is what we're getting. That's what we were working with here, Saturday JSON value. But also like this is potentially a typed value, so I think there's going to be some element of like parse the so this is going in and it's becoming a Saturday JSON value. Yeah, here parsing JSON is strongly typed. So this is coming in. We still want the opposite, constructing JSON values. I think we're looking at something like this, but there's JSON. I think is potentially going to end up being one of those big options, and if we can wire that up to the struct, I guess like Markdown and HTML would be the only other ones. Binary format, EML message pack, no. URL strings. So some of this might be we need to. This is probably going to be where we see if Kaylee knows some more things here. But I think when I mean this works, but it's not typed. So getting it typed would be really nice. Yeah. I for some reason I was thinking Saturday had a was the stuff to do the um like it had interfaces or ecosystem create type things that could parse out to this stuff. The so maybe we end up doing something like you did here, but this ends up rather than being like a top level function, it's more of a um, it would be more of a something built on top of it. What's the word I'm looking for? We have an impl. Like we get the struct, so it would be like part of the struct. So we parse it, we get a recipe, and from that recipe we can call like toString or toHTML or to Markdown or whatever, and then pull off properties as need be. So the maybe it just kind of makes sense to you were sort of heading that direction with the fallible result. All you needed though was a string and an error. It seems like if we just expand on that idea, I thought Saturday was a good place to do that, but it seems I was wrong in that assumption, which is part of why I wanted to go through this. Speaking of going through this, though, we're kind of right at the end of our time here. It doesn't seem like Saturday is actually the place where we would want to do some of this. Maybe Kaylee has some other insights, but I think you might be right, Fran. So if we run a parse and this ends up returning a recipe, I guess can we just do this? What does the recipe look like? Option. I mean, yeah, like, sure. That's probably fine, right? We'll have to figure out the WASM pack part of that. I think that's probably going to be the trickiest part, and the part where I've done a little bit of that. We can double check on how we have it. Some of these parts implemented in that tunnel parser that I have worked on. But getting the types to come out nicely, I think it looks like those are going to be the important bit, and it doesn't look like Saturday is going to be quite as helpful as I was expecting it to be. So it seems like we will end up putting in a bunch of work here to get WASM Bindgen to be okay with that. In that vein, that feels to be the idea of like what we would push on, and then we would have something like this, but this ends up basically being like so like here the parse render it's doing a parse and then it's calling render on that output. So we would have something like that to where our interface would be after we parsed it, we get a recipe and or an error, and from that we can then it would probably be like a union of an error or a parsed thing. So the parsed thing being a recipe, which would then have these methods on it to whatever, to string, to I guess you wouldn't really need like to value. It would already be that, but you would just have these additional methods on top of it. So I think, yeah, I think probably getting this recipe to come out of WASM Bindgen is the place to like really push on. But we are out of time. I've got a meeting to run to. It has been fun. Thanks for stopping by, everybody. I'll probably poke on this a little bit more today, and if I get any progress, I mean, the folks that would look at it, you've kindly shown up. If I get any progress, I'll end up pushing up a PR. Otherwise, I think we see if Kaylee has any other ideas as far as the Saturday stuff goes, unless either of you have some thoughts. But some of this is starting to get into Rust stuff that I'm less familiar with, and you're less familiar with the Rust in cooklang explicitly. So I potentially have some work to do on my end to get myself up to speed on what y'all have done. It's been fun. Next week, I'm not sure what we'll end up doing next week. Keep an eye out for the schedule on this, for the doing the scheduled thing, whatever. Yeah, I'm not sure. I've got potential thoughts and ideas, but there's no big it's all like ongoing project stuff at this point, I think. We've got some Tory stuff potentially, and we've got some now cookling stuff potentially, and some of my other little projects. We probably will just pick one of those and keep on going with those. We'll potentially sit in the local first stuff for a little bit until the local first conference stuff starts to come out, that we can talk about that. But keep an eye on the schedule. Thanks for stopping by, everybody. Have a great rest of your week. Happy Tuesday, and see you next time. Bye.